Well, that was interesting. Miss Peregrine's School for Peculiar Children. Alright, look guys, before we begin, I understand and need to make clear that there are going to be two types of people, okay? There's obviously going to be people who, like, maybe have read the book and are going to see this movie to just kind of analyze it and experience it for what it is. And then there's going to be just your typical people who like movies, or your movie buffs, or just people who want to go and watch a movie that seems like it has an interesting concept behind it, and they just want to go and see that aspect of it, okay? I feel like I need to try and contrast these two kinds of people because it really drastically alters your viewpoint when you go to watch this movie. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children is essentially a concept that seemed like it made sense to try and adapt into a movie. It was very original, very interesting, at least when I say that, I'm really referring to the books. As far as just the narrative it poses and the actual origin source of where these stories come from. It lends itself almost on a formulaic basis to be something that Hollywood would take in rather wantingly. Without giving my straight up opinion on this movie right away, I'm gonna take some time to discuss a couple of things. For one, if you were a fan of the book and you came to see this movie because you were a fan of the book, I know it's tempting for a lot of fans of the book to go and watch a movie adaptation of that particular novel and just nitpick it to death. You know, it's been talked about ad hominem everywhere on YouTube as far as just how fans, the lengths they go to try and just cherry pick all these changes and all these things, and everything that's different in the movie, or just something they just totally don't agree with when it comes to the actual adaptation of the movie. If you have read the book and haven't seen the movie yet, you know, I can definitely for sure tell you that yes, the movie is significantly very different from what the book actually is, or how it was told. Most of the major plot points, the most important ones as far as what the book brought up, they're still there. They're still very much intact. I would say, you know, for the most part, the movie follows the book pretty well as far as the length and the pacing and the actual key information that has to be given to the audience in order to understand how this universe works within this story. It starts to change, at least particularly in the movie, more drastically, directly in the middle and very much toward the end. And the only thing I'll say on that is because the book itself, the way it was done, it doesn't lend itself to be, like some high action blockbuster. While there certainly definitely is some action aspects, especially in the book, I can understand completely as someone who looks at a piece of work, whether it's a novel, a movie, or whatever have you, as something as, it is what it is, and it has to be a standalone project as far as when you try to analyze it versus something that was adapted from. And I understand it's very easy for someone who has read a book to try and watch the movie and not look at it through some type of biased eye. So basically, for the readers who are watching this video and are kind of interested in seeing the movie or haven't seen it yet, yes, I can tell you there are, of course, going to be differences. Despite how you feel about that, I don't know. I'm not going to go into any spoilers and give any exact details, but the whole type of, as far as significant plot points that happen, they don't happen quite exactly as it happened in the book, obviously. Some things get switched around, some things get added, some things get changed. Maybe the very aspect of the abilities of the children have been switched up. Some sexes and genders have been switched up. The order in which things happen have been switched up. Things that never happened at all in the book happen in this movie, so take that for what you will. If you are someone who's just here interested in a review of the movie because you just want to see the movie and you have no interest in the book whatsoever, and you're just analyzing it from a movie perspective, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children is okay. It's definitely not groundbreaking as far as, some visual spectacle or the new major blockbuster franchise that's just going to break out and, just be the next thing that people talk about for years. It definitely doesn't feel like it's something as big as, say, like the Hunger Games or Harry Potter or anything like that. What I will say, though, is if you allow yourself to kind of get lost in the fantasy of this movie, the actual universe itself that it takes place in, you may find quite interesting, as long as you take some time to really try and take in everything that the movie's trying to tell you in this span of that it's actually showing. And from that, there's going to be two kinds of people as well from that perspective. There's going to be some people who feel like there's going to be just a lot of exposition dumping that takes place in this movie, as far as how, when they try to explain things, like particularly, okay, like Miss Peregrine herself, there's a main character, Jake, who is the main lead protagonist of the movie, and he's the one who's kind of going around and experiencing most of what's happening. There's a lot of explanation from Miss Peregrine and the children that are at the school as far as how they tell him the rules and laws of this universe that he's now in. It can be very easy for some people to kind of get lost as to what they're saying. However, there are some people who feel like there could have been more. There could have been more as far as how they explain, particularly mostly the characters, because this is a pretty relatively well-grouped cast that we have here. And it's very easy to put a lot of focus on the Jake character and the Miss Peregrine character, and possibly the Emma character. But as far as the children themselves, the movie, you may walk away from it from a sense of longing as far as more stuff being explained to you, particularly just about characters themselves. Now, the actual rules and laws of the universe in which this takes place, it may feel a little bit overwhelming to some, but as far as what this movie had the chance to do, it kind of may feel like you may walk away from it feeling like it fell short in a lot of aspects when it comes to that type of storytelling. I know a lot of people get sick at this trope that I always say to kind of basically give the basic premise for this for this movie and this story, because it really ticks off a lot of the book readers. But for people who haven't read the book and you're not quite sure what Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children really is, it's basically, little X-Men. That's really only the best way I can describe it. It's young children who have unique individual powers amongst themselves, and there's some type of threat that threatens their mere existence, and they have to team up and work together to try and fight against it. And that's kind of the premise. Also, because that type of idea itself may be appealing to a lot of people, they may go into this movie thinking it's going to be, some dazzling spectacle. It is definitely Tim Burton after all. But I can definitely say it's no X-Men Apocalypse. It's not a huge action blockbuster that we anticipate it to be. There is indeed some action, but even for someone like me who has read the book, and I am curious to see how they actually portray a lot of the stuff on screen, I walked away from it too feeling like, okay, they could have done more as far as, if they are going to add action, which they did, they had to add action to make it a little bit more interesting as a movie itself. I totally get that, which that type of action sequences that take place in the movie don't actually happen in the book. And I get that they had to add that to keep things a little bit interesting, but even I didn't feel like it was enough when I watched it. But I think if Tim Burton was even trying to do anything remotely with this film, some people who are huge Tim Burton fans, and there's a lot of them apparently who just like his entire visual style. A lot of them, there's the type of camps who long for him to kind of return to his roots as far as what he directed back in the day. And it's kind of funny because when they announced that Tim Burton was going to direct this movie, I thought it made sense. I did personally. But when anyone, I guess because of my generation, when anyone says, oh, it's directed by Tim Burton, I'm thinking, okay, it makes sense for something like Miss Peregrine's, but here I am thinking about the movies he's done back then, things like his Tim Burton's Batman or The Nightmare Before Christmas, stuff like that. I'm thinking to that dark, edgy, whimsical type of nature to it, not something that we got in the Oz the Great and Powerful and Alice in Wonderland, not this basically this LSD trip that he tries to take us on in a lot of these movies. I mean, like, I was hoping, Miss Peregrine's wasn't going to be that. And I think, thankfully, it didn't go completely that direction. It came close, but it didn't go completely that direction. However, people who are huge fans of Tim Burns may feel a little bit underwhelmed that it didn't go that direction, So it's kind of a lose-lose in that situation. You'll have, again, the two groups of people, the people who loved the book may feel a little bit disappointed of what this movie has to offer, and for people who are just fans of Tim Burton may feel a little bit underwhelmed as far as what this movie has to offer on that regard as well. But despite what I say about that, as a whole, the movie, again, is okay. It's not great, but it's okay. So take that for what you will. It also should be noted that, this is technically a franchise, and as far as if they were trying to set the film up for it to be a long-running franchise, I'm not quite sure, and kind of skeptical. I mean, trying to be optimistic, but still somewhat skeptical if it has enough steam going forward with box office reception to see if it's something that can take off. Because so far, the author Ransom Riggs has written 3 books about Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. And if they, like I said, if they plan to turn this into a franchise, I'm skeptical that this is kind of a bumpy start. You're asking to bring in people who know nothing about the source material, basically audiences who are blind to all of that stuff, and you're hoping that they walk away from it craving more. And I think to an extent, the only thing they may crave is just a little bit more explanation or a little bit more in-depth, and as far as mainly character analysis. And again, if they had trouble following the plot to begin with, and then it reaches kind of like, and then it kind of comes toward the end where it does have a climax, but many people who look at that type of stuff from a Tim Burton movie may feel underwhelmed as far as what it has to offer as like a climax. So you're asking fans, you're asking moviegoers who know nothing about the book to be invested in what's being said, and I kind of honestly feel in a lot of aspects it fell flat in that regard. So I do feel concerned as far as what this franchise is going to do in the future. As far as other stuff I can talk about in this movie, the writing itself, again, it's following, for the most part, it is still following the book as far as the major stuff and plot points that have to be explained for you to even understand what's going on. It hit those pretty well and somewhat evenly paced. But as far as just how it kind of molds together, it's iffy in a few spots, and that's really all I can say without spoiling too much. You may feel like it may take that they may spend too much time on one thing and very little time on another, and it feels a little bit more jumbled and less cohesive as the movie moves forward. It starts off pretty good as far as setting up stuff for us to understand what's at stake here, but then it just kind of starts to become more of a bumpy road towards the end. The acting from all the people in the movie is pretty good. It's not particularly, it's not particularly like the best thing ever, but the acting itself is pretty good as far as the performances we're trying to pull from here. Eva Green, for the most part, pretty much steals the show as Miss Peregrine, but from someone who hasn't read the book, they may see her as the scene stealer. But if you have read the book like I have, in my personal opinion, and this is nothing against Eva Green, but Miss Peregrine herself was not meant to be so quirky as what Eva Green is trying to do as far as giving her life. I mean, Miss Peregrine is pretty lowbrow, pretty stern, pretty serious, pretty mellow in those lot of regards as far as, she's the one who's the keeper of time. She's all about routine in a lot of aspects, and it does show that pretty well. But then, I think Eva Green tried to spice her character up a little bit. But the thing about Miss Peregrine is there's not a whole lot of spice to that character itself. It doesn't lend herself to be, some type of quirky character that we kind of just see as like a big sister or something. That's not what Miss Peregrine is. Asa Butterfield did a pretty good job as Jacob, and one thing I will say is the former book readers may see that he did pretty well as portraying Jake. However, for other typical moviegoers, they may see Jake as a very underwhelming protagonist to follow because he himself is not, well, I mean, like, again, without getting into spoilers, he's seen as very unremarkable in a lot of aspects, and I think just the writing itself didn't allow Asa Butterfield to really shine as a main protagonist. There may be times where we don't feel like we can really root for him, and he definitely asks a lot of questions. But I think some people harp on the fact that he asks a lot of questions. He feels kind of lost, like he feels like someone that the entire rest of the cast has to kind of hold his hand all the way through until he finally kind of steps into his own skin, steps out of his own skin toward the end. Again, warranted by the writing, but it happens very suddenly, and it takes time for him to get to this point. But it makes sense because how else are we going to learn about this world, this new world that we've been exposed to, unless our main protagonist knows nothing and has to ask a lot of questions for us to figure this all out. Overall, I give Miss Peregrine's a 7 out of 10. Pretty solid standard, but nothing too overwhelming as far as a standout for for the fall season of 2016 by any means. Again, from people who are very much fans of the franchise, I do feel kind of worried if this is going to have enough momentum to push it to have a sequel and much less a third or fourth movie after this, if the Steam itself is not able to propel this movie into something that people want to go see in the theater. Because they may go in, some people are going to love it, but I feel like more people are going to feel like it was a little bit underwhelming in a lot of aspects, unless somehow they get just attached and drawn into this world and this universe that is trying to be conveyed to us. And it's just a matter of your taste at that point. And I feel like unless you're like a fan of the book, you may not be overly interested in what is going to happen going forward. Most audience members, I'm sure, are going to feel like the movie itself is going to feel bland most of the time rather than anything exciting or mesmerizing happening. So they may not be interested in going and checking out the sequel if there is going to be one. Again, we won't know until this movie has been in theaters for a while. So we would have to keep that in mind and just wait and see. So that is my review for Miss Peregrine's School for Peculiar Children. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon.